Hello. So this is Griede again, obviously. Uh, and today I wanted to talk about some of the things that I'm, actually actively interested in. I've always been interested in words, reading, writing. I don't think I can really place a time stamp on when I first started being interested in these things, but I did become obsessed with how people convey themselves, how they push a particular idea, how they try to convey meaning in said ideas. And so something I wanted to talk about today is I did write a story very recently, and I think it's a good story, and I think the reason I know it's a good story is because it makes me cry. And, I don't really consider myself the toughest, most manly dude, but, usually that's not really that's usually not really the goal, okay? But the idea here is the life in words, which is actually the title of my blog. And so the idea here is to write things down in such a way as that they inspire feelings and emotions. And so in relation somewhat to my other series, the creative content series, this is the idea. The goal is to convey meaning through certain vehicles. And in telling the story, you have certain elements that help deliver your story. Because at the very basic, you have a story, and it's a narrative, okay. And you could just simply spell it out, like say a poem or something like that, where it's just straight. Bleh, this is what I feel. This is how I feel, Or you can create it into a story with characters and background and villains and stuff. And so throughout the story, if your story is functioning, if it has a goal and a purpose, which it doesn't always have to have some underlying goal and purpose, it can have little intermediate elements that push particular ideas that you share, or particular ideas that you're pushing in your specific persona, for those who write under different personas. This can be successful or unsuccessful, but the point behind this video is, again, you're pushing something, okay? And the medium through which you use is just another element of that story. So if you want to write a wonderful story, all these elements are still exactly the same, all right? It's just that everything you're doing is predominantly in words. Now, you can add imagery to it. There's nothing wrong with that if you want to. But predominantly what you're doing is you're conveying your idea in text form, okay? And so the beauty of this is you have almost unlimited range. You can make your story as long as you want to, though in editing you're going to try to push back all the elements where it kind of seems like the story kind of slogs and bottoms out of the morass and stuff like that. You want to the longer your story is, you want to try to work on ideas that keep your audience's interest, okay? And that could be as simple as updating your vocabulary. One of the things I point out in my other series is, because I'm using the game mastery guide for a certain tabletop game called Pathfinder as a kind of a reference guide. They even have a section in there where it talks about words that say a GM should know as a game master. And the game master is the storyteller. He's basically the director, okay? He creates the story, the background, all the people you interact with, and you, the player, you bring your character, the person you're going to pretend to be, whether it's yourself or some other alternate persona, either one is fine, to this story, okay? And so it goes over, this is a huge list that, that GM should be aware of, but I think this is also very true of all explorative mediums, like music, for example. There's nothing wrong with writing songs, okay? I'm not going to get into whether you should or shouldn't, what makes a quality song. I think at the very basic, any type of medium is the expression of ideas and the entertainment through that expression. And so, to a degree, I feel like if you are a musician, or you're a director or anything, your ultimate goal is to entertain, okay? Because if you're not entertaining someone, then they are not absorbing the medium. Now, they can be entertained in a myriad of different ways, but if they are being entertained, that means that to some degree they are absorbing what you're pushing, so to speak. And then, of course, as you get into different songs, after a while, especially if you have a pretty broad horizon, you can start to tell the difference between different songs and the way they're written as to what the overall meaning behind it is. You can tell some songs after a while are written to, I don't want to say a higher level because that sounds kind of assholeish, but I mean, you can tell that certain songs are about exactly what they are talking about. There's no subtlety. There's no mincing of words. They're very upfront and personal, and that's very fine. And then you have songs that have a lot of undercurrent. And I feel like as a maturing individual, as you grow, that is part of understanding who you are. It's learning to seek out the things you are interested in for the reasons that you're interested in them. So in this case, I mean, if you like songs with undertones and fairly intelligent meanings and stuff that really tackle complex subjects, you should definitely very much seek out those artists who really push those boundaries. But if you like simple, in your face, this is what it is, this is how it works, stuff like that, then definitely seek out those artists that you like. But back to my central point, there is a way of writing things that by its very nature is more compelling, okay? Now, kind of breaking new ground here in the things I want to reference outside of my theory, my series, because I'm not trying to barter off of other people's fame, nor am I trying to, advertise for them. I watched a podcast recently, which it took me several days because it was a 2.5 hour podcast, and I usually don't sit down for more than 30 to 40 minutes on any podcast, so I break it up a little bit. But it was Jordan Peterson, and Jocko Willink, two fairly famous individuals, and they were talking about the strength of meaning or something like that. I can't remember the exact title on this. That's bad because I literally just got done watching before I started this podcast, or this video. But the goal that they were talking about in it is, at one point, Jocko talked about Shakespeare. He was studying Shakespeare. Now, I'll bring up Shakespeare because he's an obvious example. You read anything he writes, and if you're actually reading it, if you get involved in material, you get engrossed in what he's talking about, you remember it. It's very, very interesting how he has this very memorable quality of writing. But what Jocko talks about, and I do agree with him a little bit, not so much. Again, this is not a video about him and his views and his personal aspects and all that shit. And it's not really about Jordan Peterson either. But he makes a point that's very interesting. He said, you don't really get Shakespeare the first time, usually, unless you happen to already be a linguistic expert or something like that, or an English major. You probably have an idea what he's talking about. But the thing about Shakespearean language is that it's almost his own language, is the way he describes it. And I feel this is somewhat true. This is the only person you ever see that writes this way. It's an extremely compelling speech. The speech that he uses, the language that he uses, seems to be an extremely intelligent language, meaning that every single word is pregnant with meaning. And this is some opinion I do share with Jocko Willence, and I'm not by any means a scholarly expert. I'm not claiming to be. Again, my pilot series of Who is Your Hero? Good creative content is about the fact that I'm an amateur at this. So in the creation of these series, I'm studying what it means to create really good content, which is also nice because I can draw from almost any source to make valid points. But Shakespearean language is a good example because, again, each word is just so meaningful. It has so much meaning tied up in it. The way they're used, what they're used in conjunction with, and these words attract other words, And what this is designed to do, because there's a very good design behind this, is that it's designed to create a flow of words, okay? And this is intrinsic to a solid narrative, all right? And this can be extremely important for longer works that are purely text. I mean, if you start putting in imagery, very solid imagery and stuff like that, and imagery is the same as a very pregnant word. There's a lot of meaning in that image, and that's one of the reasons why I decorated my website with specific types of images. As you can see here, that is a really cool image. And there's a lot to it, And this one again too is a lot. If you want to see what that quote is, it's a quote by I think Dana Craig, but I can't actually see it because it's too damn small, and my eyesight's going pretty bad. But that was the reason I chose those images, is because they have that kind of quality to it. There's a lot of meaning to them. So you can add these types of images, and that's kind of like a whole other medium in and of itself, is either choosing free images, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's why people make those images, and place them on the internet, for other people to use, because that's what they want, And then you can pay artists to create images for your works, which is also, useful. It really depends on what you're going for, so whether you can find what you need. I don't think there's really any moral aspects tied up into that. I mean, without getting too much onto a tangent, the idea is the person who created the artwork, they have their own intentions in mind. If they want to submit it for free, then you have no moral obligation to pay them for that work. It is, however, considered common courtesy and decency to give them credit for that work. Okay? That's why I'm not claiming any of these images that I have. They belong to respective authors. And that's why there's a quote there, including the author's name. I didn't come up with that. Everything else on here is either mine or stuff that other people posted. And if you feel like you want to come post a response to some of the stuff I put on there, by all means, please do so. So it is kind of in part an advertisement for my website, but I felt like it was a good background because of what I was talking about. At any rate, so if you want to pay for stuff, you want it for free, that's fine. Just remember the context by which the images were delivered. Okay, it's entirely up to you to pick imagery that works for what you're doing. But anyway, narrative flow. Okay, narrative flow is a lot of things. Okay, and I'm not an English major, so I'm probably going to botch this very badly, but the goal is to deliver a stream of thought in such a way that it is compelling to the reader, or the observer. We should say observer, because reader in this implies text, whereas observer is a person who is viewing all the medium, So if this is a game, or a movie, or just text and pictures, or if it's a story just in pictures, you're still developing a narrative flow, and so everything that you put into that, and especially words, is designed around that. So there's a page, I think like over 300 words in the Game Mastery Guide, and the idea is these words aren't supposed to make you sound like a colossal asshole. That's not their goal. Their goal is, if you're using these words properly, you have a gravitas in your storytelling ability, either in your narration of the actual events as a game master, or in creating intelligent characters, because intelligent characters typically talk in a way that is slightly different from those other characters that are around them. The other thing to realize is, in that specific medium, is that your players can do the same thing, and it adds another depth, and stuff like that. But that's the point. That's the goal in creating a narrative. Now, the story I wrote recently, like a lot of things I've been inspired to do, it just kind of came upon me. Like the stuff that's on this website, I didn't plan any of this stuff out. I just felt the need to write, and I wrote it. And it's one of the reasons why I'm loath to change any grammar structure or any functionality, except for maybe that story, right? There's 2 short stories I wrote. I don't want to change the structure of it too much, because I feel like it has its own flow, and so I don't want to really mess that up by trying to push some other type of narrative on it. So there's quite a few grammar errors in some of those. But the story I wrote recently, which is not on here, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet, it deals with some really, really heavy topics. And I want to say that, that I'm fighting a good fight, and I'm trying to, help people in writing. That was my goal. No, that's just not true. The fact that it happens to address those topics is just part of the story, okay? And so but this brings to mind a topic of conversation, and this is separationalism, which is probably not the right word for it, but I won't expound upon this idea. The idea that you must constantly be working against everyone else. That to be the best individual, you can't be in conjunction with anyone else. And this, I feel, is a fallacy. This is a very, very horrible idea. Throughout history, mankind, humankind, whether you want to be male, female, or anything else, have always accomplished more by working together. As soon as more than one person has the same idea, and they express this, and they join together, they have become a group. And as long as they are cooperative in their overall goal, they continue to be a group. And this is actually what's called a team, okay? When you work together towards a common goal. So my feeling on this, whether you're male or female, whether you're interested in males or females, or if you identify as something else, some other gender, whatever you're subscribing to, My opinion, and I am the pot calling the kettle black, is that you should, to some degree, be the best individual you can be. That doesn't mean you're smarter than everybody else, you're faster than everybody else, you're stronger than everybody else. You can quote the most author names off the top of your head and get your little cookie. That's not what I mean. I mean that you, as an individual, should develop a strong sense of what you feel and what you believe. But also keeping in mind that you, as you grow, as you mature, you're going to, for the most part, gain new interests. And some interests might fade a little bit. Or you might keep hold of them, but they're not as intense. That's fine. But keep that in mind. You're constantly growing and changing as an individual. So this whole idea of I'm discovering who I am, that's a moving target. That's always a moving target. If you're a maturing person, okay? Even as and this is something I've always found very weird, very, very interesting, not really weird. A couple that's been married for 40 years, which is becoming more and more rare, but there's still a solid amount of props you can give to somebody who's managed to make it that long. The couples that have been married for 40 years, often find out things about their partner even after 40 years that they never knew. Alright? And this isn't to say that this is always something that's just kind of been in the woodwork, that they say their partner was interested in or whatever, and it just never came up. That's not always the case. More than likely, it's just the fact that you're constantly, especially now with information literally at our fingertips, with cell phones, laptops, TVs everywhere, stuff like that. We're always coming across new stuff, okay? And so interest can develop literally at any time and any place, okay? And so I feel like to this degree, these people that have made it this long, the reason they continue to make it is because it's not, well, you weren't interested in that yesterday, why are you interested in it now? It should be more like, this, what is this to this? What was it about this that caused your interest? And as someone else I once was recently got into watching their channel, it's called The Order of Man. And again, I don't like pushing other channels because I'm not a person who really wants to subscribe to anybody's ideology. Alright, I take other people's ideas and I think about them. And if I agree with them or certain aspects of them, I try to work those aspects into my life. But I don't ever want to be someone who just simply subscribes to everything somebody else does without ever questioning it. But anyway, he points out, so look, you don't have to be interested in everything that your spouse is interested in. And so, like, for example, his spouse might be interested in beekeeping, if I'm remembering the structure of the conversation correctly. It's like, am I interested in beekeeping? No. But if I'm, in a bookstore one day and I'm getting some stuff for me and I see a whole, book on, beekeeping, I remember, my lady mentioned this at one time. Okay. So I'll buy this book for her. Again, am I interested? No. But I'm interested because she's interested. Okay. And so, to me, for the type of person I am, I love conversations. I really do. And now I've noticed lately that being stressed out about a lot of things going on in my life has caused some of my subjects to be even more contentious than they usually are. And I do have a bad habit of getting personally attached to specific aspects of conversations. I think that's a constant struggle for some people. Some people manage to push that aside. But I've always felt that when I settle down, I want to meet somebody, which I'm only interested in women. Disclaimer. I want to meet somebody I can have conversations with. Alright? I don't want to ever be with someone that I can't stand being in the same room with for more than 2 minutes at a time. I just want to choke slam them. Alright, that's not me saying that I'm really prone to violence. I'm not. But my feeling is that I want to take my time, pick the right person, someone I can generally stand to be around. But my goal is someone I want to be around. When we do have those engagements, I want to be able to engage freely and discuss whatever we want to discuss, okay? And if it happens to be something like beekeeping, which, unlike the example, I find beekeeping pretty interesting, really. I don't get into it because I'm a person who has way too many interests, and I find that I just don't have the time to pursue all of them. But I think there is some merit to that, being able to just, okay, alright, you're interested in video games. You're never interested in video games before, but you're interested. Alright, okay. What kind of video games are you interested in, I mean, in this example, you've been married to somebody for 30 years, and now all of a sudden they want to play first-person shooters. My suggestion is, if you're not already interested in first-person shooters, the first thing you need to do is figure out if that significant other wants to play with you. And if that is the case, learn to like first-person shooters. Okay? Or learn to put up with them for their sake. And I think this is an important goal if your mindset is to enjoy the company of this person, for the foreseeable future. Okay? But at the very least, discover whether it's a conversation topic. Okay? If this is something that person likes to talk about. Because something that contributes to a long-term relationship is constantly being interested in the other person. Okay? And I feel like once communication starts breaking down, it's a huge sign. It's a bad sign. But again, there's this separationalism. So what I feel like is you can be the best individual you can be. Okay? And that's not inspiring arrogance or anything like that. Being a quality person, having a good idea of what you're looking at, what you're looking for. And I don't think it's ever too early to try and establish what your interests are. Okay? And what your interests are in another person. And then accept the fact that maybe this will change a little bit. Okay? The whole goal is to find something you want, whether it's in another person, whether it's in your interests, whether it's where you're at in life, is this a career that you want to engage in, do you have your dream career, or is your career simply the thing that makes you money so you can pursue your hobbies? These are all important topics, but when it comes to being around other people, being the best individual person you can be is a very solid goal. But I'm going to compare this to my experience in the military. The predominant narrative in the military is you got to be a solid individual. Okay? But the purpose of being a solid individual is to make the team stronger. Okay? You're always on a team. You're not by yourself. That's the first thing you got to remember when you're in the military. You want a good solid team around you because no man is an army. Now, I love movie examples because I love movies. I watch a lot of movies. And Rambo is quite fictitious. It's quite over the top. But there is a realism to it that's pretty stark. But the point I'm going for here is Rambo he is supposed to be the epitome of the best of the best. I mean, the absolute, purely, let me put it this way. He's one of the most well-trained individuals you can have. And the aspect is what one person could accomplish, at least in the first 3 movies. What one person could accomplish if they have a strong enough will to just accomplish it. Okay? A strong enough motivation. And the last one, it shows what that one person can do with a team of also fairly extremely skilled individuals. because that was I take that back. It's not the last one. That's just the fourth one. I forgot there was another one out, and I haven't seen it yet. And I don't know if it's any good or not, but I'm going to go watch it because I'm a huge fan. Love the Expendables 2, by the way. This is, again, pushing a solid narrative. Each person on the Expendables, again, this is a fictitious narrative, but each individual on the Expendables team is a solid, functioning person by themselves. They're all badasses. And that, by comparison, makes the overall team that much more effective. They're all fairly intelligent. They're all more or less experts in their specific fields. They're all dependable. Okay, and so that's an important aspect to consider. So when it comes to the separationalism, no. You're not accomplishing anything being constantly at each other's throats. So I feel like while you may differ in opinions, that's fine. I feel like, though, a more productive pursuit is finding the areas in which you overlap and working on them. Because constantly arguing with each other isn't getting anything done. But if you work towards the elements you agree on, you're getting something done. And that's obviously more productive. And so improving yourself as an individual is always a noble goal. Okay? And again, I don't care what religion people subscribe to. I don't care. It's a very interesting subject to me to talk about. I've talked to quite a few individuals over my lifetime. I've gotten up front and really candid conversation with, say, Mormons, which I don't agree with their religions per se, but I have noticed that their youth seems to be, well, in the small sample size I had, their youth was a very inclusive group. They're very friendly. They're very open. I don't want to say open-minded because it's an entirely different subject that I'm not going to get into. But they're very open, They're very welcoming. And that's an interesting phenomenon to see, I've talked with people who follow Islam. Not necessarily jihadists. I don't know if I've ever met a jihadist, because not all jihadists are all that obvious. Some are really obvious. But I've talked with people of the Islam faith, and that wasn't more to explore their faith and what their faith is. It's more, my conversations are usually, how does this make you feel? All right? Because again, this is pursuing life interests, okay? And I don't care what color or creed or religion you have. I always feel like, though, if you're following something that doesn't fit you, it's going to show. All right? And maybe one day you'll find you don't have any religion, that you don't subscribe to any specific one. That's also fine. That's where I find myself. I don't feel like I'm an atheist. I don't feel like conversation is important. It's like getting personal over what people who lived 4,000 years ago used to wipe their ass with. I mean, it's not going to change everyday life, So detaching your personal feelings from it is usually very much a prerequisite. But the overall goal here is I want to understand how other people feel about things. Okay? And whether that has any functional purpose, fuck if I know. But again, I'm not out to prove some ridiculous point when I talk to people about that. All right. I mean, because I can read any scholastic paper about, an overview of specific religions from a scholarly point of view, the pros and cons of this weakness, the things that are this religion, the things that they address, the things they don't address, the glaring holes in their narrative, stuff like that. I can definitely do that. Anybody can do that. That's fine. But I want to know how specific people view their religion and how that religion affects their life, because there's an interesting contrast to see, say, Christians. Christians are always a good one. What they feel versus what they practice. And like I said, I'm not making a judgment call on anybody. People feel in different ways about their religion. Though one thing that does frustrate me is people who basically preach on a soapbox that you shouldn't judge others, but they judge others all the time. I mean, we all do. We really do. Alright, we make on-the-spot judgments about people all the time. I do it, certainly. Though I like to be proven wrong. An example is if I see a really tough, manly, muscular dude, and I assume, this is going to be a pretty simple-minded dude, and then he starts, quoting Shakespeare to me, I'm going to be like, huh, and not Shakespeare that, he heard some other people quote. I mean, talking about he's really read the literature, and you can tell by the way he talks that this is something that fascinates him. And so instantly that person went from simple-minded to complex, not complicated. That's a whole different word, complex in my mind. All right. And I feel like that's somebody I can talk to. Now, I have problems when intense people, they have really intense personas, really intense personalities. They have a kind of this aura about them that can be intimidating if you're not used to dealing with people like that. But I feel like I can work with almost anybody that has some complex nature to them. I try very hard, unless they're just openly antagonistic to anybody, I try very hard to find some common ground to work with, because I'm more of a person who looks for a commonality avenue in order to make progress. Okay. And again, I try not ever to approach anybody, with some goal in mind. No. I'd rather let chips fall as they may. Now, if I sense there might be something to gain, I might push, But overall, the idea is simply to have a conversation. And in having a conversation, for me, I always gain something. All right. Whether it's a new perspective, I might gain some insight. I may be put up on something I didn't know before, Like recently I discovered the Redwall series, which I haven't even really gotten into the book, and I really like it, the first book. And it's a good series to me. A short time ago, I was introduced to the Land series by Alaron Kong, which I very deeply enjoyed until I think it's the 8th book. It kind of, sadly, it seems to be calling a little flat for me. I'm not trying to denigrate the series at all. The series is still very good. It's very quality. It's kind of literary RPG. The idea is it's structured like a person who is in a video game. The whole world is like a video game, and the person basically levels up, and other people around him level up like a video game. Okay, and it's intriguing because it has its own built-in structure, because you're developing it based off a video game. Okay, so there's that element. So, but I was introduced to that idea, and that series, and out of just conversation, I was talking about video games to somebody, because I love video games. If that's not obvious for my other series, it should be. But I love video games, and we got to talk about it. I said, hey, well, I have this series right here you might be interested in. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, man. The first book, I've read it 20 times, which is not really all that hard, considering if you had the time to sit down and read it, you could probably read the first book in 2 to 3 hours. And subsequent readings were no less enjoyable for me. And I find that weird. It's very, 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 very seldom that I run across a series that's like that. I mean, I read Treasure Island quite a few times, though now I can't remember all the elements of the story, though the Treasure Island's a fairly, I don't want to say it's a simple story, but it's a complex story, if that's acceptable, mainly because the characters are fairly intriguing. But, I read Black Beauty quite a few times. Very, very good story. Very good story. I read the Harry Potter series, the first 4 of them, probably 5 or 6 times. That was back when I was a very young teenager. My mother discovered early on I loved reading. I read all of her books. She got tired of me reading her books before she could read them. So she got me Harry Potter 1 through 4. And, I read Harry Potter. I don't think I can fly around on a broom. Okay? In fact, I don't think I've ever thought that I could fly around on a broom. Now, imagining, yes. Actually thinking I could do that, no. Okay? So I never subscribed to that particular mode of thought. But that's my goal when I enter into a conversation with somebody. I want to talk about their interests. I very rarely talk about mine. That's one of the reasons for this, this new series. This series, Griede Talks, where I talk about my interests. And maybe this will be interesting to other people. Maybe it won't. Okay, but that's fine. The goal isn't to create specifically interesting things. The goal is to talk about stuff that interests me. And perhaps in this you will find stuff that interests you. But anyways, I think I'm going to end it here because it's starting to get up to an hour and I don't like to ramble. So this will be the first video of this series. And since I've always got stuff to talk about, I'll probably definitely find something else to talk about eventually. But at any rate, if you like the content, more power to you. I don't ask people to like and subscribe. That's just that's more reminding people to do something they should do anyway. Back to my earlier comment about figuring out what you like and pursuing it. Part of that is liking and subscribing any video that you like on YouTube. Though I should point out, there's a difference between liking something and subscribing something, and there's a difference between subscribing something for the original content creator and subscribing to something that somebody else is on somebody else's channel. So there's some things to think about. But if you like some of this stuff and you like seeing what was on my blog, which I haven't updated my blog in a long time, if it becomes more popular, I might start writing more stuff on it. But if you think that looks pretty interesting, you go ahead and check it out. And check out my other YouTube series as well, for creative content. That's kind of the overall idea here, is to stick to, creative content, inspirational content. But anyway, I want to thank you all for coming on this journey with me. And I hope you found something enjoyable to listen to. Please have a nice day.